The sun rises over Lagos. 23 million people awaken. The city breathes. And in that breath, in that single moment of collective stirring, you can feel it, something ancient and something utterly new colliding at the crossroads of a continent's future. This is Nigeria. 220 million souls. The giant of Africa. And for the first time in a generation, the giant is learning to stand at its full height. May 29, 2023. The day a leader stepped forward who understood what so many had forgotten, that nations are not built by those who wait for perfect conditions, but by those who create them. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu placed his hand on the constitution and spoke words that would echo through every village, every marketplace, every university campus across this vast nation. We have no time to waste. 5 words. A declaration. A promise. A reckoning. What happens when a country of this magnitude decides it will no longer accept mediocrity? What happens when leadership emerges that treats reform not as a distant dream but as an immediate necessity? The world is watching Nigeria, and Nigeria is watching itself transform in real time. Consider the audacity required. In his first hours as president, Tinubu faced a choice that would define everything that followed. The fuel subsidy, decades old, politically sacred, economically devastating, was consuming resources that could build hospitals, schools, railways, futures. Lesser leaders had approached this third rail of Nigerian politics with caution, with hesitation, with the paralysis of political calculation. Tinubu removed it. Not eventually. Not gradually. Immediately. The announcement came with the force of thunder: the subsidy is gone. The courage of that single decision reverberates through every subsequent achievement of this administration. Because leadership, true leadership, begins with the willingness to make the difficult choice in service of the necessary outcome. And from that foundation of bold decision-making, everything else becomes possible. Walk through the streets of Abuja today and you'll see what possibility looks like when it's given oxygen and urgency. The Abuja-Kaduna-Kano Road project, not a proposal, not a committee's recommendation, but active construction reshaping the arteries of commerce in northern Nigeria. Drive from Port Harcourt toward Calabar and witness the transformation of infrastructure that for years existed only in master plans gathering dust in ministry offices. The Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway, a project of such ambition that previous administrations treated it as aspirational fiction, now rises from the earth as concrete reality. But infrastructure is never just about roads and bridges. It's about connection. It's about a farmer in Kaduna State knowing his produce can reach markets in Lagos without spoiling. It's about a tech entrepreneur in Enugu accessing investment opportunities in Port Harcourt without losing days to impassable routes. It's about a nation understanding that modernity is not a privilege but a right that must be constructed, literally and figuratively, 1 kilometer at a time. And construction continues beyond asphalt. The rail renaissance unfolding across Nigeria represents something revolutionary. The recognition that a country of this size, with this population, with this economic potential, cannot thrive on the transportation infrastructure of the 20th century. The Lagos-Ibadan Railway carries passengers today where chaos once reigned. The Abuja-Kaduna line delivers commuters safely, swiftly, efficiently. These are not symbolic gestures. They are functional transformations of daily life for millions of Nigerians. Watch the president move through international forums and you witness something that has been absent from Nigeria's global presence for too long, gravitas matched with results. When Tinubu speaks at the United Nations, when he negotiates with world leaders, when he represents Nigeria on the continental stage, he does so not as a supplicant but as the leader of Africa's largest economy. The respect he commands derives not from rhetoric but from the tangible evidence of a nation in motion. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Nigeria's participation, once hesitant and half-hearted, has been transformed into active leadership. Tinubu understands what others missed, that Nigeria's size means it doesn't just participate in African economic integration, it shapes it. By positioning Nigeria at the center of continental trade architecture, this administration has turned geography and demography into strategic advantages rather than administrative challenges. Foreign direct investment tells the story that statistics sometimes obscure. Billions of dollars flowing into Nigerian markets because investors recognize what locals have known for months: the fundamentals are changing. The government's commitment to economic reforms is not performative, it's operational. Currency management, banking sector consolidation, regulatory modernization, these are not slogans for campaign posters but daily realities reshaping Nigeria's economic landscape. Security. The word that for years carried the weight of national anxiety. The northeastern regions where insurgency seemed perpetual. The northwest where banditry became routine. The southeast where separatist tension simmered. Under this administration, security strategy shifted from reactive scrambling to proactive dominance. The military, properly equipped and strategically deployed, has reclaimed territories that seemed lost. Communities that lived under the shadow of violence now experience the possibility of peace. But security is not merely the absence of conflict. It's the presence of state capacity. Its police forces modernized and professionalized. Its intelligence gathering enhanced by technology and coordination. Its borders secured not just by personnel but by systems. The Tinubu administration's approach to national security recognizes that true stability emerges from the combination of force, intelligence, and the restoration of state presence in areas where governance had retreated. And where security stabilizes, development accelerates. Farmers return to abandoned fields in Borno State. Markets reopen in Zamfara. Children attend schools in Kaduna without the calculation of risk that once accompanied education. These are the human dividends of effective security governance, the proof that policy translates to protection, and protection translates to possibility. The digital transformation sweeping through Nigerian governance represents perhaps the most profound shift in how citizens interact with their government. For decades, bureaucracy meant hours in queues, forms lost in filing cabinets, services accessed only through personal connections. That era is ending. The digitalization of government services, tax collection, business registration, identity management removes the friction that allowed corruption to flourish and efficiency to languish. Consider what happens when a young entrepreneur in Ibadan can register a business online in hours rather than spending weeks navigating bureaucratic labyrinths in Lagos. Consider the transparency introduced when tax payments are tracked digitally, when government contracts are published openly, when citizens can access services without intermediaries extracting informal payments. This is not theoretical good governance. This is the practical architecture of a functional modern state. The youth of Nigeria, 70% of the population under 30, have watched previous governments promise transformation while delivering stagnation. They've heard about their demographic dividend while experiencing demographic frustration. This administration approaches youth empowerment not as a ministry portfolio but as a national imperative. Student loan programs that actually function. Vocational training centers that connect to actual employment. Technology hubs supported by government investment and private sector partnership. Walk through the innovation districts emerging in Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt and you see young Nigerians building the future without waiting for permission. They are creating fintech solutions that leapfrog traditional banking. They are developing agricultural technologies that increase yield while reducing environmental impact. They are launching creative enterprises that project Nigerian culture and talent globally. And they are doing this in an environment where government policy increasingly enables rather than obstructs entrepreneurial ambition. Education reform under this administration recognizes a fundamental truth: no nation can achieve sustained development while its educational system produces graduates unprepared for modern economies. The emphasis on technical and vocational education, the partnerships between universities and industries, the improvement of teacher training and compensation, these initiatives acknowledge that educational transformation is generational investment with exponential returns. Healthcare infrastructure expansion tells the story of a government that understands state legitimacy derives from service delivery. New primary healthcare centers in rural communities. Hospital equipment modernization in tertiary facilities. Pharmaceutical manufacturing capacity development to reduce import dependence. These are not glamorous projects that generate headlines, but they are foundational investments that determine whether a nation can protect the health of its citizens. The power sector, historically the graveyard of political promises, has seen more substantive reform in 18 months than in the previous decade. Electricity generation capacity increasing. Distribution networks upgrading. Regulatory frameworks modernizing. The goal is not merely incremental improvement but transformational change, a Nigeria where businesses don't budget for generator fuel because grid power is reliable, where households don't calculate appliance usage around rationing schedules because supply is stable. Agriculture, the sector that employs more Nigerians than any other, has received focused attention that moves beyond rhetoric about self-sufficiency to concrete programs supporting farmers. Access to financing. Distribution of improved seeds and fertilizers. Development of agricultural processing zones that add value before export. The recognition that food security is national security, and agricultural productivity is economic productivity. The central bank's monetary policies under this administration have navigated complexity with competence. Exchange rate management that balances multiple competing pressures. Interest rate decisions that control inflation while supporting growth. Banking sector reforms that strengthen stability while encouraging lending. These technical achievements might not inspire viral social media posts, but they create the macroeconomic environment where businesses can plan, invest, and grow. International partnerships have multiplied as Nigeria's commitment to reform becomes undeniable. The United States, the United Kingdom, the European Union, China, major global powers are increasing engagement with Nigeria because they recognize that this administration delivers on commitments. Trade agreements materialize. Investment treaties finalize. Development partnerships activate. Nigeria is reclaiming its position not as a country perpetually on the verge of potential but as a nation actively realizing it. The fight against corruption, often promised and rarely delivered by previous administrations, has been embedded into structural reforms rather than left to dramatic arrest and splashy prosecutions. When government services digitalize, corruption opportunities diminish. When procurement processes become transparent, favoritism faces exposure. When revenue collection modernizes, leakage reduces. This approach treats corruption not as an individual moral failing to be punished but as a systemic vulnerability to be eliminated through better governance architecture. Port efficiency improvements might seem technical, but they ripple through the entire economy. Reduced clearance times mean lower costs for importers. Better logistics mean faster delivery for exporters. Modernized facilities mean increased capacity for trade. The Lagos ports, once notorious for congestion and delays, are becoming competitive with their West African counterparts. This is the kind of unglamorous but essential reform that separates nations that talk about competitiveness from nations that achieve it. Revenue generation has increased not through higher tax rates but through better collection systems and broadened tax bases. When more businesses operate formally because registration is easier, tax revenue increases. When digitalization reduces evasion opportunities, collection improves. When economic growth accelerates, the tax base expands. This virtuous cycle demonstrates that effective governance generates the resources needed to fund further development. The renewed Lagos, a city that has always symbolized Nigerian dynamism, is experiencing transformation at multiple levels. Transportation improvements. Environmental cleanup initiatives. Public space development. While Lagos has long been Nigeria's economic engine, it's becoming a showcase for what's possible when governance capacity meets development ambition. And the improvements in Lagos set standards and create templates for urban development across Nigeria's rapidly growing cities. Legislation passed and implemented under this administration reflects priorities aligned with national development needs. The reforms to ease business operations. The bills supporting technology sector growth. The laws strengthening intellectual property protection. Legislative achievements matter because they create the legal architecture within which progress becomes sustainable rather than dependent on individual leadership. Watch President Tinubu interact with citizens during state visits across Nigeria's 36 states and you see a leader who understands that connection matters. He listens to the woman selling vegetables in Kano. He engages with the factory worker in ABA. He acknowledges the concerns of the civil servant in Calabar. This is not performative populism but genuine recognition that leadership requires understanding the lived experiences of those being led. The renewable energy initiatives gaining momentum across Nigeria represent forward-looking planning that acknowledges both energy security needs and environmental responsibilities. Solar farms in the north. Hydroelectric potential in the Middle Belt. Wind energy prospects in coastal areas. Nigeria is diversifying its energy mix not just for environmental credentials but for strategic energy independence. Regional development has received intentional focus, recognizing that Nigeria's diversity is a strength only when all regions have pathways to prosperity. The Southeast industrial potential receiving support. The Northeast agricultural advantages being leveraged. The Southwest commercial dynamism being enhanced. The South-South's resource wealth being managed more effectively. Balanced development isn't just equitable policy, it's strategic nation building. As this narration reaches its conclusion, understand what you've witnessed. This is not an administration managing decline or navigating survival. This is leadership that looked at Africa's most populous nation and decided that competent governance could unlock the potential everyone claimed existed but few worked seriously to realize. The reforms are comprehensive. The execution is focused. The results are materializing. Nigeria stands today at a different position than it occupied 2 years ago. The trajectory has changed. The momentum is real. The transformation is underway. And while challenges remain, because challenges always remain in nations of this complexity and scale, the direction is unmistakable. The giant is rising. Not someday. Not eventually. Now. And the world is beginning to understand what Nigerians have always known, that when this nation decides to move with purpose and unity, when leadership emerges that treats governance as sacred responsibility rather than political opportunity, when reform is pursued with courage and consistency, Nigeria doesn't just participate in the future. It shapes it. This is the story being written in real time across 220 million lives. This is the legacy being built through infrastructure, institutions, and inspired leadership. This is Nigeria under President Bola Tinubu. And the best chapters are still being written.